Hello and welcome to Fathoms Deep, a Black Sails podcast. I'm Liz Stevens from Common Room Radio.
And I'm Daphne Olive.
Okay, and let's jump into episode 7, the climax. We're getting there. This is it. This is what it has all come to.
I know. This episode has been like, well, I was just waiting, actually. I was just really, really waiting to get here. And then this whole week, I've just, this is the beginning of when things...
You know, I totally agree. I watched it today and I was like, this is Black Sails.
Exactly.
This is it. This is what I've been waiting for. Yeah. And that's pretty much how I felt, I think, the first time I watched it, too. Because if I'm not mistaken, we watched this episode at like 11 o'clock at night, which is my bedtime anyway. So I was tired, but it was so compelling. And then, of course, when it ends, I was like, no, we have to watch it. We have to finish this up. We have to finish
Yeah,
the
there's
season.
really no way. I mean, I'm impressed with any of our listeners who managed to watch this one and not continue if this was their first time.
And not go on. Yeah. And yeah, you have our full permission. You don't have to wait till next week. Yeah. By all means, watch episode 8 because it really is just awesome. This is so cool. Sail! Okay, Daphne, so why don't you give us the brief overview?
Okay, so things are a little different this time. We have the beach / walrus. I grouped Mrs. Barlow's house in that because it's related to Flint. We have the town.
Okay, sure.
With Eleanor and the brothel. And then we have a whole new place that we have the island where Vane is. And that's just brought
that's right.
a whole other element into this. Well, a lot of new elements into this story. I think it's a very, very powerful part of this episode. And those are the settings and the parts. And of course, as usual, they're completely all interwoven with each other. So let's start talking about characters.
Prepare to board. Aye.
Where are we starting?
I would like to start with Flint. Sadly, we don't have Billy to start with this episode.
Starting with Flint. Wow. Let's just get right into the crux of things. Okay, let me have a sip of wine. So I think that this is the first episode where we really start to meet Flint. He's coming just a little bit unhinged. And we're getting more and more.
A little bit. I know, I was going to say.
He's coming apart at the seams, and it's really fascinating to watch. He is all over the place in this episode. And again, I just cannot give enough credit to Toby Stephens, who is just killing it with this character. Every time he's on screen, he has so much going on. Gosh, is he great in this episode.
Yeah, he's amazing. I think you even said like I had made a joke to you, or I sent you a screenshot of something in a conversation, and you said, "Boy, he looks crazy there." And when I watched today, I thought about it. That
conversation with Gates,
right?
That whole conversation with Gates in the tent is like crazy eyes, and it's such an interesting scene because he is saying, you know, this is reasonable, and who would not see reason with the most manic, insane gleam in his eye of any human.
Well, and that, I mean, I watched it today, and I started to watch it with that more in mind, and and I realized like I actually wanted to start with him and Eleanor, but I think that makes a lot of sense because I think actually we watch him get more and more unhinged as the episode as the episode goes on. So let's start with Eleanor, where he seems to be still a little bit in control and distracted. I know, and I love that. Did you see that? Like you start off, you see Miranda, like the person comes and tells Miranda that Captain Flint is back,
that Flint is here,
and then you see his face, and even after seeing it so many times the first time I watched this week, I was like, he's sitting there with Miranda. I was so sure when he looked like that he was sitting with Miranda, but then you hear Eleanor say Captain Flint, Captain Flint. So I thought that was interesting because you know where his mind is.
And it's interesting why he's putting things off, too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, you definitely know where his mind is. That's totally right.
Okay, so let's talk about the scene with him and Eleanor and Silver. Gates is there, too.
And Silver.
Yeah.
Silver cracks me up.
I know. We know it. This is...
I think he only had... I just remember that one line where he was like, yeah.
I know. Where he does the little laugh. Like she's going through like, the hellishness of her situation.
Yes.
And she's mad. She is really mad she's really mad at Miranda. And she's telling Flint all this horrible stuff that happened and how she dealt with it. And there was a point where she was being sarcastic and he said, oh, okay, so it all went well. And then Silver kind of did a little like guffaw from the side. And the look that Flint gave him.
Yeah.
But he did. It was so subtle. He was really showing that he was aligned with Eleanor. Mm-hmm. Showing their common experience. So yeah, I don't know how we, she talked about what happened. And then Flint's just like taking all this in. I mean, we saw all this happen. We saw these giant shifts happen in town in what was a very short period of time. And he even said all this since yesterday.
Yeah, what a day I missed.
Right, and then he said, what a day I missed. That was after she told him that she's now on Silver's side. And I just loved it. Like, because like you said, like he's not saying a whole lot, but you see him like she's working really hard to assert her new authority with him now that she asserted with everyone else. Silver's doing his little job of like demonstrating that Eleanor is now his protector. And Flint's just doing it all in his face.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Totally agree. I also have to say in this scene, I love Eleanor's costuming.
Oh, I know.
So good.
I know.
Oh, man.
I know.
She looks so put together. And she's got I decided to take my ship necklace. I'm going to put it on pearls instead of a golden chain because in honor of Eleanor, because that's such a cool necklace.
I know.
Yeah, it's going to be really
and
cool.
her belt with the keys hanging off of it. I know. I
always
see the belt.
The keys. Yep. She looks awesome.
She's terrific.
Does.
There was a moment where my daughter walked in, and I don't usually watch Black Sails anywhere near her, but she walked in and she saw Eleanor and she just said, oh, this is Black Sails?
That's awesome.
Eleanor Guthrie, popular with the 9-year-old set for obvious reasons. Okay, so let's talk. I think we covered that is a really interesting scene, but I think we covered what is interesting about it. The scene I really want to talk about is at the end of the episode when Eleanor, and I always notice this now because of you, Eleanor, again, recycling whatever's in the cups back into the pitchers.
Yeah.
So we know that it's the end of the day, and she comes across drunk Flint.
Mm-hmm. And very, very drunk Flint.
Right. And this
was a really interesting scene. And I remember the very first time I watched it because she comes, he is obviously, about to pass out at the table, but pulls himself together pretty well. And she takes him then kind of like off to this side room. But that's all I could think of is like, look at all these candles and look at that bed. What are they about to do? If you make Eleanor sleep with Flint, I'm out. I'm done.
Oh, and that was what I wanted to talk about. The first thing I want to talk about is the flip of roles. Like, so we watched basically in the last episode, we watched she take the reins. She took over power so decisively. Mm-hmm. And he is, again, he's been very vulnerable the whole season, but, last episode was pretty crappy for him. With the letter and such, and Billy.
Yes.
And she becomes the person comforting him and and buoying his belief. And he says, tell me we're not crazy. And then she's the one who says, the outcome is only uncertain for those who don't believe.
Mm-hmm. And it's really the perfect thing that he needed to hear, because then he's coming off this is past the two conversations he's had, one with Gates and one with Miranda, where both of them are causing him to doubt himself. And that's what he says even, right? Maybe they have reason to doubt.
Yep. He's talking about his crew there. Yeah, absolutely. He has fallen into a pit of kind of despair. And I mean, the two people we will talk about each of those interactions, but basically the two people who are most important to him in the world have just rejected him to some extent. I mean, Gates more than Miranda, but they both told him they don't believe in his vision, which, you know, is pretty much the only thing that seems to be driving him.
Yes.
And you know, and to some extent, at least for his experience, rejected him personally. I just found it so fascinating that she really used his language. I mean, this mirrors what he said when she came to him a little bit despairing about Scott when he was in his beachfront office. And he said something very similar to her. That's when he said that, you know, people will someday say this is inevitable. It was so interesting that this got turned around. And then, like what you said about the weird room and such, there is a moment where there is no question in my mind that they want us to think that maybe they're going to kiss. Like they're doing the back and forth eye thing that they always do in movies right before someone kisses. And I also remember going, no, this cannot, like this will really make me
ruin
angry.
Everything.
Right. Well, it's not just that it will ruin, I mean, it was going to actually make me, I mean, she has daddy issues, right?
Yeah.
And the side of this that I like is like this feeling of like, yes, women, you know, stereotypically who have daddy issues will go for an older man, right? Okay, so I like and don't like that. Actually, mostly don't like that aspect. That's the part of it I didn't want them to go there.
Yeah.
But on the flip side, I like then that he kisses her forehead. And
it is very paternal all of a sudden.
Exactly.
Yeah. And you see him make that decision.
Exactly. And she's disappointed. Yeah. I think it's clear. I don't know. What do you think? I felt like she was disappointed.
I didn't think it was clear, actually.
Okay, good.
I
like that better.
I think that they both weren't sure what they wanted. And then all of a sudden they were like, oh, are we going to, is this what we're doing? And then when it wasn't, I feel like they both felt that sense of relief and that they both got exactly what they needed.
Oh, great. I like that much better.
Yeah, because I think that she got that kind of father-daughter moment that she's been looking for forever, being on the same team and being seen as someone who is competent and who is able. And then again, being the one to help remind Flint of his vision and to buoy his confidence. And then for him to see that and to appreciate it and to just appreciate her, I think, meant a lot.
Well, and
to Eleanor.
Right. And she had just been, you know, betrayed essentially by both of her fathers, her biological father and the man
Scott
who essentially raised her.
Mm-hmm.
Whether, you know, Scott definitely doesn't think he betrayed her, but I think her experience of it is, and that would sting much more. I mean, from Richard, she expected it. From Scott, she did not expect it.
Well, and it made me think, too, of, and this is Flint and Eleanor, it made me think also of what we talked about last week when we were talking about Miranda and the porch with Pastor Lambrick, and how I said that it doesn't seem like the highest order of, you know, human experience should be sex because sex is so easy. But this was where, like, yes, we're both attracted to each other in this moment. And yes, this might be something that felt good in the moment. But in the long run, in the grand scheme of things, this relationship is better suited for whatever else that might be, whether it's to keep it professional or in this case, have that paternal, affectionate moment that we had. So I liked to see that. That's my favorite part of this scene, is that it did show, I think, in an episode we get more awkward sex, that sometimes, you know, just screwing somebody because you can isn't necessarily the best option to go forward with.
Right. Whereas
maybe
partnership,
make other considerations.
Right. Whereas partnership and emotional, spiritual support is actually the valuable option.
Mm-hmm.
And so far, we haven't had a lot of both of those things in the same place.
No one in this show is getting that part of living right that we can see, that we've seen so far. We haven't seen a single healthy relationship, have we? Like, it's certainly not a healthy sexual relationship.
Right. No, we have not.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, we have not.
I don't think that we
have.
have.
No, the two have not yet been combined.
Right. Yeah. I hope that we get there.
Me too. Okay, so I think let's move on. This is such an exciting episode and such a difficult episode.
There's a lot that we're not talking about with Flint right now, but that's because I suppose we're going to talk about Miranda. We're going to talk about Gates.
Yes.
Is that why?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I have.
Just making sure.
I have
because there's so much more to say.
No. I have much notes on Gates. So let's go to Flint and Gates because I really think. I mean, they're all so important. All of his relationships are so important in this episode. But Flint and Gates is really this is the I feel like the crux of it. It really, really is. And this interaction breaks my heart, and it
is heartbreaking and beautiful.
Yes, it's so beautifully done. Okay, so we start with Dufresne, seeing Dufresne getting his tattoo, and he's now quartermaster. We have established that he's now the quartermaster, so that's interesting.
It is, and it seemed to me a weird choice too. I was with Flint on that, but again, I guess if you chew a man's throat out in front of everybody, then things change a little bit in others' estimation of you.
Exactly, and I love that we started the interaction with them actually, at least momentarily having what seemed like a really honest, giggle with each other.
Yes.
But we shift pretty quickly, and then Gates reminds Flint that he had just promised Eleanor that he would hold Miranda to account. And I just felt like it was already so transgressive the way he said that to him, that he said, so you'll be going to see her right now, right? That just seemed already like...
He was calling him to the carpet.
Right. It was already a tone that we had never seen Gates take with Flint. So then Flint says yes, but Gates is obviously not satisfied. He comes to that shack that I guess Flint keeps his stuff in, and he brings up the letter. And this was so interesting because he brings up the letter just like Billy did. He seems to think that Flint knew about this letter. Yeah. And Flint, and it's so interesting to see Flint's face because we know this is the first time Flint knew what was in the contents of the letter. That the word betrayal was there, because when he asked Billy what's in the letter, and Billy just said it was something from the Barlow woman.
Oh, I don't think so. I think he said, "Why does that letter say that you're going to betray us?" Didn't he?
I don't think it does. He says it to Gates. I don't think he ever says it to Flint.
So.
He didn't get Billy didn't get a long time to talk about anything because immediately after that canon went through.
That is true.
So I don't think so. I think all he did was say it was from Mrs. Barlow. Oh goodness! See, now I wish we had gone back and checked that. Should I go check that?
Yeah, that's okay though. Well, I don't think it's necessarily that important because, I mean, it seems that he has not seen the letter, nor did he know that Miranda was going to write it.
Obviously,
and that's the most important part, is that he was thrown by this. But I love what he says about her when he says that, our relationship is a complex one, which you're right, understatement of the year for sure. But then he says, what is clear is that she desperately wants to leave this place and will say anything to make me go with her. And I mean, God, that was so sad.
It's so sad.
And it's
what? Sorry.
No, I was just going to say desperate is the right word. That's the Miranda that they've been showing us here lately.
Absolutely.
Is a desperate woman who does just want to leave and get out of there.
Well, and the irony of the interaction with Gates is that Gates right after that said, goes through his thing of, he says, I'm so tired of you telling me stuff and me choosing to ignore stuff. This was a moment where Flint was completely telling Gates the truth. And, Gates was just he couldn't see it because they had this relationship of Flint kind of glamoring Gates all these years and Gates choosing to go along with that. But this was a moment where Flint was being completely open about, saying his relationship is complex. This is Flint not being decisive, showing a little bit of vulnerability.
No, it's true. He did show vulnerability, but I think that Gates understood everything and got it. But it was just like Miranda. But Miranda told him when he said, "This path will not lead where you think it will."
Right.
It's just the same. I think that's what Gates
Absolutely.
said. It's like, I see where you're going. I see what you're saying, and I want no part of it.
Right. No, absolutely. And then we can get into what he said. Sorry, it's so hard. He said, "Yeah, I'm tired of playing this game, especially after last night." And Flint says, "What happened last night?" Which is a little crazy.
Come on, Flint. Hello. I know.
And he said that Billy had said that Flint sees them all as expendable, and then that's where my heart breaks. Where he says, "Billy wasn't expendable to me. He was a son to me."
Yeah.
And, so that's it.
It was really lovely. And I like, too, that Gates delivered it with such emotion without, choking up and without tears. It was really well done.
Oh, my goodness. It was phenomenal. It was a phenomenal moment.
And then Flint comes right back at him. Like, if you'd been a better father, this would never have happened. And that's when he lost him, I think. It was so emotionally manipulative. And I think that's when Gates was like, I'm not going to do this anymore. I will not be manipulated by you to follow you to God knows what end, at what cost of life. Yeah.
And it was also, the part that's baffling to me is it felt almost like, like Flint said, "Yeah, I did throw Billy off the side of that boat." Like and
he deserved it, right?
Right. It was a really
it did feel like
tactically,
that.
This is, I think, the point that leads us to the beginning of Flint losing it. Like, he's just, I think he's reached a place where he's overwhelmed. Like, this is just so not Flint-like to say something. He's really being vicious, one.
Yeah.
And not at all tactical there. Gates doesn't know for sure that Flint had anything to do with Billy going over the side.
Right.
And he doesn't say, "Billy, I did it," but at the same time, to answer what Gates said with, "Well, you should have treated him, you should have guided him better." He is implying that he was forced to throw Billy off the side of the ship.
Yeah,
and
you're right. He is.
So it's just like, that was kind of the beginning of Flint just not being his normal tactical self. And I think he's just at his wit's end here, and he knows he's losing Gates. And I think like we said last week, that Billy for Flint was just, a means to an end.
Yeah.
Gates is a person he really cares about. And
it shows, though, how bad he is at caring about people.
Yeah.
Because here is Miranda, desperate to leave this island, yelling at him, "There's no joy here, there's no life here." And here is Gates saying, "How could you not recognize that Billy was a son to me and sit here and tell me that I matter to you?"
It's so true. It's so true. I think this scene really shows us that Flint, and we'll learn more about why Flint wants the things that he wants. He is doing this for a vision, and it's not a selfish vision. Like, this plan he has, so then he finally, Gates is just turning away from him and saying, "Okay, you're the crew's problem now. I'm done with you." And that's when Flint takes it farther into his honesty, and he says, that's when he explains to him what his plan is, that he's going to,
right.
And I love that he used the word sequester.
Yeah.
So he explains to him that he's going
a portion,
right. But I love that, because he doesn't say, "I'm going to take." Well, he does use the word "take" first, but then he uses the word sequester, which is governmental language. Like, this is official taking, and he does lay it. And I have to say, I have to quote him a tiny bit. When Gates says, so he explains that he wants to sequester and why, to some extent, and then he explains, and Gates says, so you're lying to the crew, which is funny because he's been lying to the crew. Gates knows this,
right?
But then he says, he explains to him, that he, like we've understood up until now, that Flint doesn't trust. He has this kind of paternalistic view towards the crew. He wants to do good for them, but he doesn't trust them to do it for themselves.
Yes.
And then he says everyone's lied to for their own good. And, and he uses examples until he gets to sovereign. And that's when Gates gets really mad, this idea of the king, which, again, Gates knew this. None of this is new. So Flint explains that, that they'll all be rich no matter what he does, even if he sequesters some portion. And then he says to them, absent their worst instincts, and this is when he's already crazy-eyed.
Yeah.
But absent their worst instincts... their pride, their greed, their suspicion, in the light of pure reason, who says no to this? And this for me was a buzzword. Like, I hadn't really noticed that he used reason, but I've been thinking a lot about the period that they're in, I guess because of Republic of Pirates and because I've been reading some history. And reason is an important word at that time. This is the beginning of the Age of Enlightenment. And which was a school of philosophy that was going against religion, but not just that. But the focus of it was that we could get rid of belief of all sorts and use reason to assess our world and make our decisions, and that would bring men to a higher place. And so I can't talk about this too much because we don't know stuff about Flint, but I wanted to bring this up because this will be significant. Flint is, I think, by saying that part of what he said, is identifying himself with the Age of Reason.
Yeah.
And this could explain a little bit his paternalism because he sees the pirates as people that he kind of could swoop in and protect because he comes from this, this more enlightened, I'm trying to think of a different word than enlightened that he's coming from this other world, and that he wants them to understand. He wants desperately for Gates to understand. He wants everyone to understand what he has built in his own mind as the solution for everything. But he's done such a bad job of it.
He has. He's doing a bad job of it. He is.
And the next thing I wanted to bring up, which I told you when I noticed it, and I had not noticed it until this time, and thank you, closed captions, for this, is right after he says that, he says, I'm going to deliver them Hal. I'm to something better. And Hal is Gates's name, and I didn't know that. I had to look that up. But he uses his first name, which in that time frame, that was a big deal. People didn't necessarily use first name. I mean, that was just a very familiar thing to do. And that was, I think, his last ditch effort in a lot of ways. Like, it just seems like that was the moment where he was so trying to make this connection with Gates.
Yeah.
And failing.
And he missed it. Yeah.
Yeah.
When he does, I mean, he looks crazy in that whole scene. He's got the crazy manic eyes, and Gates just looks so disappointed.
I know.
Because it has been years that he's believed that Flint is what's best for the crew, and he's just been telling himself lies. He says this last bit as he's trying to say, no, this is right, this will be best for everyone, and now he's starting to see Flint for who he really is, which is someone who is coming undone. Yeah,
absolutely. And again, I mean, this is the beginning of something we'll talk about more in the next episode. And maybe there are listeners who are not sympathetic to Flint. It's impossible for me not to be. He's so flawed, but he is trying so hard to do something good. And he's going about it so wrong. It's just, so I'm so brokenhearted for both of them. I'm so brokenhearted, obviously, for Gates because he lost Billy. And because I think Gates is really blaming himself. Like, I think that's a lot of what his side of the conversation is that he knows that he's been propping Flint up all these years, and that ultimately that led to Billy's death in his eyes. I mean, he thinks Billy's dead, and he thinks that Flint was the person who did it. Mm-hmm. And that's just so tragic. But Flint's side for me is also so tragic because he really he so believes in what he's doing, and he's just
well. And I like that we see him trying to grow and trying to change. Like when he said to Miranda, "What do you think it is that I'm doing here?" Because when she says, "There's no love here,"
right?
He says, if there's no love here, what do you think I'm doing all of this for? He's like, I'm trying to build that life for us. I'm trying to give us that opportunity. And he is trying. Again, he's bad at it, but he's definitely trying. And then we do, though, I think, see some growth in his character when at the end he gives Eleanor that kiss on the forehead.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's
instead
interesting.
Of whatever else could have happened. Because he is actually then thinking, okay, what is actually best for this girl and for... You know what I mean? And instead of just grabbing that situation for what it was, which has been his MO for the rest of the time.
Yeah, that totally works as an idea of what's going. That's interesting. I like that interpretation of his interaction with Eleanor.
Mm-hmm.
Because the rest of it is so problematic. I mean, we can move on to talking about Flint and Miranda now, if you'd like. Also, so sad.
Yeah,
I wanted to amend something I said last week, where I said that none of them are happy people, and none of them are people who would just sit on a porch and drink lemonade and enjoy themselves. I actually think that Miranda, deep down, is that person.
I think you're right.
I think she's the person.
I think she is.
Yeah, I think she's the one person who would have been capable of that. And I thought about what I said when she's saying that there's no life and no joy and no love here. That is she's actually seeking that. I don't believe Flint. I mean, I think Flint on some level thinks that's what he's seeking, but. And maybe it's later on influencing me. I think on some level, I mean, I think he shows his hand. I mean, when she explains what she did, again, what she did also, very bad tactic. Like you said, this is a pipe dream. She so endangered him. I mean, he has every right in the world to be upset with her. She endangered him. She endangered the crew. She endangered his plan. His mistake was that he thought his plan was her plan.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And then this is a very important moment when she's talking about getting the pardon, and he says that that there's, what does he call it? He calls it intolerable price.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, what price? And he says, to apologize to England.
Yeah.
And this, we don't know yet all of the story. I mean, we've heard bits and pieces of their story. We know now that they are in Nassau because of this story with them and Thomas. We don't know the details so much of that story. We've just gotten hints. Right. But this I think is really just such an important statement for Flint. He says, "They took everything and then they called me a monster. This ends when I grant them forgiveness." So the two things I see in that statement are, one, this harkens back to the first episode when he told Billy. That's what he told Billy. He said that they have branded us monsters.
Yeah, that's right.
So the question is now, is he talking about the pirates really? Is he talking about his own backstory, which we don't really know yet? Or does he identify with the pirates because of this word monster?
Wow. Yeah.
So there's one part. I mean, all I can do right now is raise questions. So they're just things to think about.
Well, it is a tangled mess right now. Everything Flint is and everything he's doing is a tangled mess because he sees this clear, bright light at the end of the tunnel picture that is this idealistic version of what Nassau can be. And his whole way of getting there is, again, putting so many people in danger and hurting so many people and really hurting himself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we get these little snippets here and there of the backstory. But I love that people like Miranda and Gates, that he has these people in his life who will call him out on those moments. And he doesn't listen to them, which kills me. I hate that he storms out on Miranda and that Gates ends up being the one that walks out on him in the little shed or shack or whatever it was. But Miranda is excellent again in this scene when...
So what I think this is what you're talking about, where she says, this path doesn't lead where you think it does.
Yes. This path doesn't lead where you think it does.
And he pauses.
And if he was here.
He pauses at the doorway when she says that. Or does she pause? Mm-hmm. Does he pause when she says the second part, which says, if he was here, he would agree with me?
I just saw the door slam. I barely even noticed the pause.
I think there is a pause. I think there is a pause.
Well, good.
And I think, we know who the he is. I think everyone knows who the he is right now, right? I mean, I think.
I think the first time I watched it, I wasn't sure.
Then. Okay, we'll leave that vague. If whoever can figure out who that is, great. And whoever can't, I think we'll learn more in the future. We keep saying that. I agree with what you're saying. I mean, I know it's so sad because now, I mean, it seems like he has two people who tether him, and one of them is Gates, who has now turned his back on him. Yeah. And one of them is Miranda, who I feel like she won't turn her back on him, but she's trying so desperately to convince him of something, including in ways that could endanger him. Maybe she won't make that mistake again. But the problem is, he has this vision. We've heard his Odysseus idea. We've heard what he said to Gates about delivering the pirates. But when he says, this ends when I grant them forgiveness, and by them he means England.
Yeah, and society.
This is where we realize he will never... Oh, God, I almost did a Hamilton... He will never be satisfied.
Yeah, though.
This is the point where we understand that there's no end to it. There's no end.
It'll never be over.
Right. I mean, she said you'll fight a war to make a home, or to, I forget what she says.
Yeah.
And that may he'll fight a war to make a life. But that's already crazy. On many levels, although he seems to think he asserts that that's possible.
Yeah, well, he says you can't have one without the other.
Right. And that is an interesting argument. That's a back and forth that we could do, or they could do, for a long time, of whether war is necessary when you're dealing with a tyrant and things like this. But the moment when you want the tyrant to ask for your forgiveness, that's the moment when everyone around you needs to say, okay, now you're asking for too much. Now you've created a goal.
It's become a personal vendetta.
Right. Well, and a goal that can't be fulfilled. England will never ask James Flint for his forgiveness. This just won't ever, ever happen. So that I felt like this is the moment where he's kind of declaring, like, I will just be at war forever. And so that's terrifying. And maybe this is, I like to think that this is because he's just had such a crappy day that he reached that point. But it's hanging there now. I mean, this is now one of the potential, paths for him to take, and one that we know can't work. So there's just I feel like this whole episode just raises questions. That's all it does. It just
it does. It just well, it deepens the question.
Right,
is what it does.
Absolutely,
and it makes the answer have there's more at stake.
Right. So the last thing I wanted to talk about with Flint, which isn't actually with Flint, but it is. It starts with Flint, but at the very end, when we see Flint and Gates on their two ships. Right, they're about to go off to hunt the Urca, and Gates had said,
gorgeous.
"Yeah, it is gorgeous." And Gates had said, "I will follow your lead. I will do what you say. I will be your consort for the process of taking this ship, and then I walk away." So it makes sense that they're each on their ships, and you see Flint nod at Gates. And then you just see Gates thinking, and then we have this flashback of Gates talking to Dufresne the night before in a bar. And it makes me even more sad. So we say,
was it
like,
a flashback?
Yeah,
I thought that we had that conversation first.
No, so you see, first you see Flint nod, you see Gates's face, you have the flashback, and then after the flashback, that's when you see Gates nod back.
Oh, I didn't even put that together.
Oh,
yikes!
It's haunting, and so
no.
In this conversation, we see that Gates and Dufresne had been working together during the whole span of this episode, because Gates asks Dufresne about the stuff with Silver,
right,
and then talks to Dufresne about, basically the group of dissatisfied people, which we don't know exactly who that is, although we can guess part of it from happenings in the episode. And then Dufresne says that they're concerned about Gates, that they're concerned about their plan, which he lays out. And he says, the lying we could forgive, Singleton, all of it, but not Billy. And then he says, when we get that gold, we're killing Flint. And we want to know that you won't stand in our way. And it's so haunting for me, because then you go back to seeing Flint and Gates facing each other. And that's when, after
disembarking.
Right. And that's when we see Gates do his nod. But we now know what's actually going on in his head.
Chilling.
It is chilling. And I think he also, again, he played this so beautifully in the bar. Like, I believed him 100% that he was going to back him, that he was going to back the pirates that want to kill Flint. But I also believe that it's breaking his heart. Like, his heart's been broken.
Absolutely. Well, they even said, Dufresne said, I know that he's your friend, but...
Exactly.
And you see that little flicker in Gates' eye where he's like, he was my friend, and he's not anymore.
Yep. Right.
Yeah.
It's just,
And I've had that happen, too, where someone that you're invested in and that you trust has just changed so much over time that you have to step back, that you have to cut those ties. It's a hard thing to do.
It is a hard thing to do. In our world, that doesn't mean, hopefully, killing them.
Yeah. But even so, it's the death of a friendship, though, the death of a relationship, which is a very real thing.
Right.
So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
You're absolutely right.
It's so textured and rich and sad, just so sad, but so like just that, I don't know, the kind of sadness I love in a TV show where it's just, you feel
tragic.
All of it. And even though these are people, more than 200 years ago and, or 300 years ago, they're 300 years ago. And they're so different from us, and you feel every bit of what they're going through, and it was just so beautifully portrayed.
Yeah, I completely agree. All right, so that wraps up Flint as much as one can wrap up the man who is James Flint. Who are we going to talk about next?
Well, I've been waiting. I really am ready to talk about Silver and Randall. This is the moment. This is the moment I've been waiting for.
This is the one. Okay. Silver is really coming into his own now.
Oh my goodness. So for me, this is, I will do this as not spoilery way as possible. This is hugely pivotal scene or series of scenes for Silver.
Yes.
First of all, I just want to make note of, now we have a running thing of DeGroot, who is the voice of Dune. I don't know if you've noticed this. Like, DeGroot is always the person who's like, this won't work. This is dangerous. This is just, he's just such a downer.
He's such a mom. DeGroot.
I know. I'm just not sure how this man became a pirate. So
why aren't you an accountant?
I know, that's seriously. Funny. So right now he should be like, like one of those people who like figures out chances of bad things happening for an insurance company.
Insurance salesman. I like it.
So we start with like Randall's really upset because he's been taken off the ship because DeGroot I love how he puts it. He's like, well, I just brought up the idea of a one-legged man in the kitchen being a fire hazard, and then things got out of hand. Sorry, Groot cracks me up. I just had to bring that up. Mm-hmm. So, okay, so I see this, and this was really interesting for me looking at it this time. Like, we have a series of conversations with Silver and Randall that, in my eyes, kind of mirror the series of conversations that Silver and Eleanor had 2 episodes ago.
Interesting. Okay, yeah, I see that. Sure.
So do you want me to walk you through what I'm thinking here?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I numbered them. So the first one we have, they force Silver to come talk to Randall, and Randall does his minimal speaking as usual, and he says, I can cook. And the first one I'm calling disregard. This is when Silver, he's just like, he tries to do his charm thing. He throws some platitudes at him. He says, oh, well, setbacks can lead to better things or something like this. So he's just, this is, in our theme of underestimating people. So he starts out underestimating Randall.
Although it's also a nice bit of irony and foreshadowing for when he himself loses a leg.
Absolutely. He will be a one-legged man acting as cook.
Knows. Yes. Uh-huh. Yes.
Okay, so we have the first stage of disregard, of underestimating. And then the second time, there's this interesting thing where we go back and forth between a conversation between Silver and a conversation between DeGroot, Dufresne, and Dr. Howell, where basically we watch the 3 of them come to the same conclusion that Silver's trying to convince Randall. So this is the second stage, is trying to convince him, trying to basically manage him, to work him, he's seeing, to use the language from the last episode, he's working on him as his mark. Silver's working on Randall as his mark. So he goes through the whole thing, and he's like, look, dude, you said I'm a thief. You think this is going to be bad for me, but I'm the one with the key to the treasure, so this may turn out kind of bad for you. So you should really think about this. And at the same time, the 3 guys are coming to the same conclusion. Like, if we expose this, we lose. This will condemn the captain, but it will also condemn the cook, and we need him if he's got this information. So we have the back and forth. So that's the second stage. The third stage is when Silver gets more aggressive about it, where he says something like, he's like, fine, it was nice knowing you. Like, he's trying to really drive this home. So he gets a little aggressive about it. And the fourth stage is after they had him memorize the page of, the medical page, and Silver's like, this is a really bad test, and he's right.
He's right. It's a terrible test.
It's a terrible, terrible test. So this is the point where Silver understands that this is really kind of dire for him, for Silver. And this is where he goes from disregard, convincing, being aggressive, to entreating him, to trying to make Randall happy. And that's the point where he says, what if there's a way neither of us have to die? And he admits to taking the page. That's the point where he tells the truth. Yeah. And
which was risky.
It was very risky, but he finally said, he went from trying to strong arm or disregard Randall to trying to make Randall happy. And that was the point where he showed Randall some respect. And I felt like this really mirrors the stages where Eleanor first was underestimating Silver, and then little by little she sees how Silver can be important for her and help her. And Silver does the same with Randall. And so there's 2 parts of this that I want to discuss. First, I want to discuss how this works. And then Randall does his little, you're a thief, you're a thief, you're a thief to everyone. Brilliant.
Very smart.
Yes, brilliant. So, this is Randall being suddenly very smart about how to...
Exactly. Supposed to be a half-wit.
Yeah, exactly. So this suddenly works. So the people who were leaning more towards keeping this quiet and keeping amongst themselves to begin with, said, okay, well, if Randall's now saying we're all thieves, good luck. Yeah. Good luck with taking this to the crew thing. And then later we have the moment where Silver and where they're on the ship. Like, so Silver had made this deal with Randall where he would convince everyone to take Randall back onto the crew, which they had taken him off of, and that Silver would vouch for him. Silver would be responsible for him.
Right. Yeah.
So then we have the moment where Randall's sitting in the kitchen and Silver he says, okay, I've been thinking about this. Either you're the luckiest half-wit or something else. I wonder if you didn't orchestrate this whole drama to get yourself back on the ship. And he said, you somehow have managed to have all the benefits of being on this crew minus any risk.
Yep.
So this is my big question, finally. I love the whole idea that people had of Randall being like an oracle, and I think there is something to that. But ultimately, we get to Silver's question is, are you some kind of genius?
Just a mad genius.
And I love that. And then the minute he says that, he said, oh my God, you're the most shrewd operator. Maybe you're a genius. And then we get Randall just staring him in the face and does that like long fart. Which again, this could go either way.
Yeah.
He could be. That would be the mad genius move at that moment when you're about to be exposed. Or he's just a dude who like can't understand what Silver's talking about farting. Now, I mean, should we say our own beliefs about this? Or should we just leave this open for everyone? I think that Randall is the genius. I really do. I think that he's been playing this game from the beginning. I think that think? I think that when he had the accident, I don't remember if they get into the details. In the first episode, Billy tells Silver that he was wounded in some sort of battle, some sort of fight. I think there's a chance that Randall's been playing this game the whole time.
Oh man! See, I think it's more likely. Well, and I guess it's not even about what's likely, but what I like and what works for me is that he has like PTSD and he has lucid moments and he has crazy moments. And totally sometimes they happen to line up at a good time and sometimes they don't. Right. So, yeah.
The beautiful thing about this is both of our theories totally work.
Yeah. Yep.
Even if you thought that Randall doesn't really have any lucidity, it works.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I love the ambiguity of that.
Yeah, it's really fun.
I love it so much, and it really does. As we go on with this story, the whole concept of being underestimated, being something that has power to it, will grow. I think this is such a beautiful, beautiful demonstration of that. It really is.
That's a great point.
So there's that aspect of it. The other thing that I really wanted to point out is that in stage 4, when Silver is trying to make a deal with Randall and has stopped underestimating him and has chosen to work with him, he says these words. So we know a lot about Silver so far. We know, he's a con man. We know that he has been very clear about being completely selfishly motivated, always in it just for himself. And he says these words. He says, I'm not a joiner. I never was. But I'm willing to do it now. Yeah. Let's both live to fight another day. And I'm not going to say anything else about that. I just wanted that to sit there. I wanted everyone to hear those words being focused on. And we'll talk more about that later. Okay, so I wanted to talk next about Jack and Ann and Max. Things start getting really interesting here in my eyes. Well, we start with Jack and Anne having sex.
Is that what they're doing? Yeah. Boy, are they having a terrible time of it.
Oh, man. I know. It's, and it's funny because this is the first time we see them after that really touching scene last episode where she talks about him choosing her and then we get to
really
this.
Just getting used to now understanding that they are in fact a romantic couple and not just partners or like a brother-sister team or whatever was going on. And yet again, neither of them seem to be particular. I mean, they seem there's really no tactful way to discuss this scene, I feel like.
No, there's not. I mean, right. It is, I mean,
Well, what's interesting to me about the scene is that although, Jack is the one who's having trouble staying engaged, as it were, he is also tied to the bed. Yeah. So surely there was a fair bit of foreplay going on, and he's still just like completely checked out because he lives in his mind much more than he lives in his body. So if his mind is elsewhere, his body is not there to play along or along for this ride. And it's interesting too, because the few times in the series when we do see his, when we see him even seem to be turned on, it's because somebody has done something smart. We've only seen his eyebrow raise once or twice, and it was because Max did something really smart and really clever.
Right.
So,
but we know he loves Anne.
Yeah, you are absolutely right. He loves Anne. You're right. He does love Anne.
Right. And what you said about the tying up and the other thing that to be honest, I'm not a prude, but there's some things I'm just not comfortable talking about on a podcast. The offer she makes him.
Yes.
And the tying up really, I think, beautifully illustrate that these two have a sexual history. I mean, they have a level of intimacy.
And they know one another.
They have.
That's a good point.
Yeah, but it's more than. I mean, it's more than just, some level of familiarity. Like, they have their sex things.
Yes.
That are their things. I mean, I felt like, even though things weren't going well, there was a level of comfort and intimacy about how they have sex.
Interesting.
That is kind of touching.
That makes sense.
You see what I'm saying? Like, it's not going well right at that moment.
Yeah, it's not going well at that moment. But even the fact that she's not even completely undressed, there is something familiar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's just, right. Exactly. Like, it's just, again, not good sex. This is not what anyone would want to have, what they're doing right there.
No.
And yet it hints
yeah.
And yet it hints at, a history of intimacy that I find very touching.
Yeah.
And we can, I mean, there is a direct parallel to Miranda and Flint. I mean, she's on top, not going well, man distracted by thoughts, woman trying to just, make it all happen.
Right.
And yet where Flint and Miranda just seem troubling to me, Jack and Anne seem like a couple where it's just not going well this time so well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying? The difference?
I know exactly what you're saying. And there is a big difference. You're totally right. I agree.
Right. And, I mean, again, he explains. He's like, look, I'm really distracted right now because things are going really crap for us.
Well, and it's so funny because, again, we have all of this. Everyone keeps telling us how smart Jack is. And he is not being smart. He has been dumb this whole season. He's just making mistake after mistake after mistake. I wish that our listeners could see Daphne right now rolling on her couch laughing.
Well, and she says that to him. She's like, dude, you're the guy who says you're smart all the time. Figure this out.
Right. Yeah. And it's true. How is Noonan's not making him a prophet? Like, how has he not thought yet that maybe somebody is cheating me?
Exactly. I mean, it is funny. It is funny. And again, Jack is smart at certain things. He's good at managing people. But then the scene with the crying prostitute shows us what's going on.
Right. And it's so interesting because he has obviously such a soft spot for these women.
That's the problem.
And he is. He's like, I've I'll have you know, I've cut a man's throat as he begged for his life before.
Do we believe him? Do we actually believe him about that? I don't know.
I think, if he's made it this far as a pirate to a quartermaster, then yes. But either he just disengages in those moments emotionally, or I wonder if maybe he has a soft spot for women because of Anne, and because Anne could always take care of herself. Like, this is that, like, maybe he just doesn't know what to do with women who aren't Anne.
I know. It was so funny because I love that where he tells the slitting men's throat, and then he's like, "You're barking up the wrong tree," but he turns away from the crying prostitute and he's like, "Wrong tree, wrong tree."
Yes.
He's just really failing at this. And then Max comes to the rescue, and I love this. Like, that Adele comes into Max's room.
Cool. She is so cool. She's smart. She's level-headed. She is emotive and emotional, but she doesn't allow those emotions to rule her actions. She is extraordinary, and I love her.
Right. I mean, I do too. And I love this. So, like, Adele comes into Max and is saying, like, "Yo, everyone's stealing. You should pull your shit together and start stealing too, because, we're basically we're robbing them blind. There won't be a brothel much longer at the rate that we're robbing them blind." And Max, we don't know. Like, we don't, see wheels turning or anything. But the next time we see Max, she is masterful. The way that she disciplines the prostitute who gave Jack too little money.
Right.
And then she says to him, she says, "Get your fucking house in order." Like, she just did this so beautifully. She didn't go up to him and say, "Hey, everyone's stealing from you and I can fix it." She completely demonstrated exactly what she needed him to see.
Yep.
And you're right. I mean, that's the thing. The beautiful thing is that we started out, or they started out, I can't take credit for this. They started out establishing Max as an emotional person, as a person who cares for and relates to other people through her love of Eleanor. So they started with that. And now, and I mean, also in the first episode, we see how smart she is. I mean, obviously so savvy with the page and everything.
We've always had that. Mm-hmm.
But I love that in this episode, she is a badass, but we never doubt the caring, person that's underneath there. Like, we already established that. And so she's already
very layered.
She is. And we already, like, we just already know all of this. It's like the opposite of Flint, where everything is up in the air and it's all question marks. I feel like with Max, it's all potential. There's so much potential. Like, I feel like we're so positive that Max is going to just do amazing things and blow us away over and over again.
Yeah.
But we know her. We know her so well already. Mm-hmm. And, and she's, right. She's somehow a loving person, but not vulnerable to other people's bullshit. She will, and that was beautiful. So we don't know what's going to happen exactly, but we see that she, everyone else there is looking short term on how they can just line their pockets and steal.
Right.
And
I wouldn't think any less of Max for just taking a few days off too. I mean, her life was hell down there on the beach. So for her to just be holed up in her room with the door shut makes complete sense to me.
Oh no,
but
I like that they recognize
her
that.
Act together. Yeah.
Right. No, I like that Adele said, "Yo, pull your shit together," because that did recognize that Max had taken that time. I mean,
yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Just Max love. Just a lot of Max love.
No, I agree. I have a lot of Max love too. I think that's great.
But yeah, so I just love that. I just feel like anytime Jack and Max, and we've had little of it so far, not too much, but when we see Jack and Max interacting, it's just pretty amazing. Yeah. And we see Mrs. Mapleton, the woman who is the madam or whatever we'll call her. She's in the background.
That's right.
We do get to see her in her reactions, and she clearly also, she did not expect Max to do what she did.
And she better be scared because she's going to lose her job.
Yeah, she is. She is. I think it's okay for us to say that. I think it's pretty obvious.
Yeah, I think it's clear. Yeah, after that little exchange. Yes.
Yeah. It's true. I mean, it's interesting. Like now that we've been talking for a while, I really feel like this episode has so much going on for its own sake, but it's also just doing an amazing job of setting up all this cool stuff that you and I know is coming.
Right.
And it's so much fun.
Okay, so let's move on then from Jack and Max and Anne and talk about Eleanor and Mr. Scott.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to break your heart again. Lots of heartbreaking stuff going on in this episode.
Man. It's just, this is a hard one.
Well, she calls him out on the betrayal, on leaving her, and then says, how will these people who knew that you helped lead the slave revolt, how would they feel if they knew that you were also the one who caused that ship to be following them in the first place? And he says, I did it out of love. I did it to help you, and you might not see that for what it is. And so what Eleanor offers him his position back, basically helps get positions for as many of the slaves as she could. 6 of the girls under her employ.
Well, I think it's all of them in the end. She actually
was it all of them? Did she get all of them?
Yeah, it was in the beginning. I mean, when he went to go talk to Erne, he said that he basically said that Eleanor had said that she would, that she was taking it under advisement or something very big.
Right, that's right.
And that that was a hard moment. But in the end, she does. She actually uses the power that she now has. Part of it is very convenient for her because one of the captains in her consortium had lost crew.
Yep, she had to get some more crew members.
Out.
So that
but
did
she
work
actually,
out.
if I understood correctly, she actually kind of begged, borrowed, and stealed to figure out how to get all of them, buy all of their freedom, and find places for all of them. Yeah. The part that I wanted to discuss was 2 things. After they talk about what he did, and he said that he did it out of love. He said, "Look, I didn't mean to abandon you. I was going to stay and help you figure this out." Yeah. And she said, "Look, that was not your decision to make." Mm-hmm. And she's right. And I feel like that was our new Eleanor speaking.
We do have a new Eleanor,
right? Mm-hmm. She didn't rage at him, but she asserted that she gets to make her own decisions,
right?
And she said she tried to reassure him. She said, "Look, I understand that Flint's not perfect. Flint sometimes doesn't tell me the whole story, but this is the direction I've chosen to go."
Right.
And I respect her for it. And on the flip side is this tragic moment where she says, "Well, I don't. What does she say? It was something like, are you going to leave me or something?" And he says, "Where would I go? I belong to you. I'm your slave."
Yeah.
And that was a moment that just broke my heart for both of them. Like their situation, I don't know if you remember, she looked away from, she turned away from him.
She
when
did.
He said that.
And she says,
she couldn't look at
I never
him.
thought of you like that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, I thought it was a really, very subtle way to show, just the tragedy of their relationship. I mean, slavery, obviously, slavery, and we will go into that soon because we're going to talk about Vane, but slavery is such a big part of the world at this time.
Yeah.
But in their relationship, there has always been this aspect of it that he was obviously more aware of than she was. Mm-hmm. And does not diminish. I mean, we've seen now what he was willing to sacrifice for her.
Yeah.
It doesn't diminish his love for her, but it just puts this horrible, horrible atmosphere around any relationship, any quasi-familial relationship that they have. And and I feel like fathers are a theme of this episode.
Yes.
And we've had a few examples of that. I mean, Richard only comes up in storytelling, but if we look at Richard versus Scott, again, all Carson and Lady Mary things aside, I mean, I do think that Scott is kind of the father that raised her. mean, Richard did say that he taught Scott so that Scott could teach Eleanor. I mean, he was there her whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a big deal for her and a big deal for him. I mean, it's so tragic. Like they are torn apart because she's going down this road and she feels that she needs to. And he says, like, when he says that he went on to Hornigold's crew, he said, as long as you're working with Flint, I'm always going to be tempted to thwart you. Yeah. So I need to go be somewhere else.
Yep. Yeah, it was lovely.
It was lovely. I think, that's most of what I wanted to say about that. There is a nice moment where Hornigold is saying to Scott, where he asks her, like, how do I manage her? How do I deal with her? And I love what Scott said. He said, you forced her hand in front of men whose respect she needs to run her business. What did you expect her to do?
Yeah, he does understand her for whatever that's worth. Mm-hmm.
Right. No, I do. And I think that was a very good thing to say. I mean, I agree that Hornigold was right when he called her a tyrant in a petticoat.
Yeah.
But I think at the same time, what Scott's saying also makes sense, is that Hornigold was not understanding the pressure that Eleanor lives under. And Scott has always understood that.
Mm-hmm. It's good stuff.
It is good stuff. I mean, yeah, that's Eleanor. Eleanor isn't a huge part of this episode.
Yeah.
But Vane is, so we could move on to Vane.
Yeah, let's move on to Vane. Charles Vane is amazing in this episode. And it's such this odd little side story that they have that, in fact, I almost missed the tail end of the show because when it went to black after the two ships start to go off, I pushed pause and I was done. I started to walk away and then I saw that there were 3 minutes left. And I was like, oh, maybe there was one of those behind the scenes things. And that's when I realized that I had cut it short before the resurrection of Charles Vane, which is amazing. Yeah,
it is amazing.
He's excellent. Zach McGowan is excellent in this episode. He always is. But there was a lot of really good camera work, too, in this episode. Because when he goes over to the island or wherever it is that he's gone, where this big hulking man beast is and all of the branded people, and you realize that something akin to some sort of slavery is happening.
Oh, no,
it is slavery.
Yeah, it is slavery. We see the one boy who has the same scar,
the same
as
branding,
Vane. And then when they're walking to go see him, the bearded man, we see boys in chains. I mean, the boys carrying that log are in chains.
Yeah, definitely.
But
not everyone there is enslaved because some of them were part of his crew.
Right.
Is that how it goes?
So that's the thing, is that there were...
so it's a combination.
My understanding of it is that there were the people who were part of the bearded man's crew. Mm-hmm. And Vane talks about them having been pirates. So they were pirates.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And I did want to bring up actually a parallel to a historical pirate real quickly before we get into this. Adele actually made a joke where she said, I don't remember what. When she asks Max, she says, well, everyone's talking about you because you managed to make the whole Ranger crew disappear. And Max says, oh, but they went wherever. She said they went somewhere. And then Adele says, and I'm Henry Avery.
Oh,
So Henry Avery was a historical pirate. He was actually one of the first really famous pirates. Like people actually wrote books about him in his lifetime. He did have a history with Nassau before Nassau became the Pirate Republic. Mm-hmm. He actually had been there. And what he did afterwards, after he made a bunch of money, being a pirate, he and his crew possibly, I think this is, well, no, actually, there is a part in the Pirate Republic where actually a character we'll meet later in this show went and visited him in Madagascar. So what they did was they left the sea and they went and lived in Madagascar and were supposedly just like living in huts, and they had married women in Madagascar and they were just living off of their spoils and having this, bungalow beach life in Madagascar.
Yeah, boy, that's the way to do it. That's awesome.
Yeah, so I don't.
This did not look like easy living.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't at all.
But
I did feel after reading the book that that maybe they were a little bit referencing him, especially because there's more than one Henry Avery reference in the show over the seasons. Yeah. But it just the fact that there was a Henry Avery reference in this one episode, and then this crew that were once great pirates, kind of before the period of Charles Vane, who had chosen not to be. That's it. Just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah.
Okay, so there was the pirate crew people and the enslaved people. We do see a few women on the building behind them while they're talking when they're sitting around the fire. I did notice that this time, and the reason why I had noticed this and was looking for it, not that it means anything, is I believe there's a subtext of that would make sense in this situation of possibly sexual abuse of the children.
Oh,
so I'll talk about that. I mean, first let's talk about their first interaction, and then I'll talk about that. And it's possible that it's not. I think there is possibly an element. Again, slavery is enough abuse already, so it doesn't. We don't need that for this story to make sense.
Right. Yeah. Well, I was just going to say that the camera work was really excellent.
Oh, right.
Because
sorry, I totally interrupted you.
No, it's okay. But the camera was up at this high angle on Vane most of the time, and he looked so diminished,
Absolutely.
so small, and so young. And part of it was the camera work, and part of it was Zach McGowan being amazing. And then he asked him what his name was, remember?
Yep.
And it called back to that time when he was standing there with the apple, and he's like, "I'm Charles Vane of the Ranger." And this time there's this quietness, this hesitancy, this this humility, really. I would even call, this humility when he says his name. And it was so different from that first time when he threw it like a weapon. And this time it seemed like this could be something that could hurt him or could shame him. It was wonderfully done.
I know. It is so much so. I agree with you completely. It was really... You're just so scared for him, aren't you? I was so scared for him the whole time.
Yeah, I was scared for him a little bit. More than that, I just wondered what that backstory was. It was interesting because it almost seemed like he was going to confess to this guy who he was and who he had come from. And it really seemed like he had gotten what he needed and was going to be able to walk away without it, even though he seemed so nervous and so frightened, until the big guy pulled back his shirt and saw the mark. And he gave that awesome speech about there being something better for these men in Nassau and for strong men if they would just usurp this situation in which they had found themselves, and this captain with his cowardice and with his cruelty. And then,
sorry.
Go ahead.
The thing I think that motivates this, I mean, he had, I think you described the first part so perfectly. It's the pulling back of his shirt is in the second part where we see them later on.
Yeah.
And everything had worked out for him. He was going to get, they had made an agreement. He was going to take pirates. But you get this long look of him looking at the boy who had come to him in the beginning. The boy who had established, again, they established the connection between Vane and this boy and the other boys at the very beginning with the scar.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I was so worried for him the whole time, because I guess I just understood from the very beginning that he had been a boy enslaved there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's when he looks at him, and that's when the bearded man says, "Wait a minute, what's going on? Like, what's up with you? Why, because they had worked it all out. He should have just been like, awesome, come scary former pirate dudes, and let's go get on my ship and take Nassau.
Right.
But he hesitates, and I think it's so. I mean, I felt like you could read so many things into that hesitation, like. He's supporting. I mean, I love it once the bearded guy realizes that he was a slave, he gets really cocky and he says, "Go, make me rich."
Yeah.
And so I think, there was that aspect in his mind of like, here I am now. I've just made a deal where I'm going to really enrich this person who enslaves people like me.
Yeah.
But also the point where he makes the speech, like, so there's the first part where they made the deal and he looks at the boy and then the bearded man sees his scar or, looks at his scar. And that was the point where the sexual abuse came to me, was that he said, he gets cocky. He says, fine, make me rich. And then he walks off with his arm around the boy. And Vane watches them walk away, and that's when he does the speech. That's the moment where he says, where he riles them up and says, I can free you from this. Right. And, let me use some of his words.
Sure.
He says, you are a strong crew. And this is the first time we're going to hear Vane use this expression in the future. He calls them proper pirates.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
When Charles Vane says proper pirates, I just... I want to be a proper pirate when he says that. The way he says that just makes me want to be noble and strong like him.
Yeah.
And then he says, but he says something like, but now you've been stuck here to suit his weaknesses.
Mm-hmm.
Now, his weaknesses could be referring just to the fact that the bearded guy doesn't want to be a pirate anymore, but it could refer to other stuff. I just think there's an opening there, and it's a very disturbing one, and it's not at all out of the realm of possibility. I mean, this is something that has always gone hand in hand with slavery.
Yeah,
is sexual abuse. Again, I'm not saying it's not spelled out, but it is an aspect that in my eyes would make so much sense in the storyline of just how Vane does he got everything he came there for. And I love when the bearded man says to him, when he realizes he had been a slave there, he said, this could not have been easy. It must have taken a lot of strength to come here. And this was the thing. I mean, this I feel like answers the thing the thing that Vane had always been talking about strength.
Yeah, interesting.
Like, he found the inner strength to go do something that he needed to do for himself, I feel like.
Yes,
that
definitely for
himself. He needed to go back to this place. And this was the thing that was always, I mean, it's crazy. I mean, he's, for us, the strongest pirate, He has what we saw from the beginning as this inner strength, but I think there was this part of him that always had this doubt about how much strength he really had.
Well, what did you think of after that awesome, epic, dramatic fight when the guy leans over him and says, I'm proud of you?
Yeah, I think he is proud of him, and I wanted to bring this back to father figures. I mean, this is a really sick version of that, but I do think in a way that's what I thought of. We have Gates talking about Billy as his son. We have Scott and Eleanor, and then we have this.
Yeah,
and
interesting.
That's what it reminded me of. And that's a really disturbing version of the way to look at that. How did you look at it?
I wasn't sure, except that I knew, and I still believe, that Charles Vane wanted to hear that from someone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, I totally agree with you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just a shame that this is the person he has to hear it from, I suppose.
Yep.
And just to wonder what it means. Yeah. Because I love that this quest that he went on was for himself. Yeah. It was to find his own strength. And so on the one hand, he heard somebody say that, and it shouldn't mean anything, but it had to. Like, it had to cement the fact that this was the right choice to come back. No matter how he takes it, it has to cement that for him, I would think.
Oh, I think this is actually exactly the person that he needed to hear that from. As disturbing as
Even
that is. I mean, I just feel like, I feel like I really appreciate what this show has done now, that they took the person who seemed, I mean, we saw vulnerability in Vane in a beautiful way in relation to Eleanor, but as a strong man, as a strong pirate, we never doubted him. And I just feel like showing this backstory, and I think that's why I tweeted earlier today. I just was watching it again, and I was just like, he's just a lion. He is strength and nobility, and the fact that he could be so strong, even if he doubts himself, which obviously he does,
right?
But that he could be so strong despite this backstory, but despite this history, is just so powerful. And the fact that he goes back and he isn't just like some strong guy. He goes back and he has compassion, that he goes back and he had a goal, but in the end, he couldn't turn his back on the young people who are now slaves there. Right. Like, it's just that moment. I mean, he sees him walking off with that boy, and then you get shots of different slaves. You get shots of the former pirates, and you get shots of the former slaves. And I feel like you really can see his struggle between his goal for what he wants to do in Nassau, and just his such a deep feeling about the plight of enslaved people, who was him. That he knows their life. He knows what it is, and that ultimately he chose the risky move of confronting the man who had enslaved him and who is, bigger and physically more powerful than him. He did it on principle, and I love him for it.
It's great, and he's as good as killed for it. And then rises from the grave.
Yes, I think that's not an accidental thing.
Oh my God, it's so cool. So cool. Epic ending to this episode. So awesome.
I think the rising from the grave is definitely a pretty obvious theme that they're playing on. Just throughout this whole season, the character of Vane has been so fascinating, and it's so interesting because you could just look at him and be like, cool, badass pirate. Yeah. And at the same time, if you choose to look, you'll see so much depth there, and such a fascinating conflict. Conflict's not the right word. I mean, I think all of his parts are integrated. They're just not necessarily the parts we would put together in a badass pirate.
Right.
But they all work.
I think that even between Charles Vane and James Flint, like, as much as I see the humanity of Flint, Vane is an easier guy to get behind.
Yeah.
I mean, he seems to have more nobility than Flint does.
It's fascinating because I've always been a lover of Flint, and I still am. I love Flint. I love Flint like crazy. But you're right. Vane is our noble person. I mean, he is truly noble. Flint thinks he is, and
Flint
has
is trying
moments.
To. He's trying.
That's
to,
true. That's the right way to word it. That's the right way to word it. Is that Flint? He aspires to a nobility that I think Vane already has.
No wonder they don't get along then.
Yeah.
Ready to guns! Full complement!
Okay, so I feel like some of the themes that we had written down are ones that we really have discussed. So I was just going to bring them up so that we'll remember them for the future. I think that the nature of strength is something that we've continued with. So we talked about that a lot with Vane. We talked a lot about I had brought up who was Flint. We've talked a lot about who he is. So
we did.
I think that, again, this will continue to be something that we discover over time. The question of who is Flint is something that will be a process of discovery. What was your theme that you wanted to bring up?
Well, it seems to me that we keep on coming across this idea where we have these well-meaning people who think that they know best, and so they impose their will on others for their own good. We keep hearing, I did this out of love, or when Miranda says to Lambrick, you know, I'll my husband would have, and I will take your shame, remove this yoke off of you out of love. Although when we see Pastor Lambrick open this episode dripping with sweat in the middle of this cornfield, talking about when will the shame and the guilt and the sin be lifted from me, clearly he has not been helped in this matter. And we get that conversation with Gates and Flint, too, where Gates is saying, I see what you're telling me, and I simply disagree, and we have to go separate ways. There are so many people throughout this series who will try to do what is best for a common good, to try to do what people cannot do for themselves, and find that it fails the people and that they end up failing themselves as well.
So I have a question then. I wanted to compare this then to the Silver and Randall situation, where Silver didn't intend to take responsibility for or help Randall, and I can't say that he loves anyone. And yet he did help Randall. So that's an interesting thing.
It's true, but I still think that at this point, Silver's still looking out for his own skin. And even
he is.
And even when he says that he's a joiner now, it's still because this is his best option.
No, it is. But I guess the comparison I wanted to make was that when people have a grand idea of how they help people, that's not working out very well.
Right.
But possibly when people just incidentally help other people and take that on without some larger philosophy, perhaps. I'm just curious. I'm just bringing this up. I haven't thought this through. But might it be that when people just help each other, you know, not from some grand philosophy, but just from like actual human interaction.
Or responding more in the moment instead of having this grand scheme. Because again, when we get that lovely kiss from Flint to Eleanor on the forehead, it's in the moment. It's not a part of the scheme of things.
Right. Oh, okay.
That's sure possible. I like it.
Right. We should pay attention to that because, we definitely are. I feel like you're right. There's a clear message that when people are trying to help because of some abstract thing, right? That's not working out very well for them or for the people they're trying to help. My question now is that is there a counter version of helping that does work?
Even with Mr. Scott in the slavehold.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So we'll keep an eye out on this as we continue watching, as we get into the awesome, epic finale of season 1 next week.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's think about that more. And I was going to propose for our season 1 wrap up that we look back at all the themes. I was going to list the themes that we've talked about, and we could go back and kind of see how they played out.
Sure. I think that's wonderful. And
this is one that is worth really us kind of putting our heads through all of the different episodes and trying to see, because I think you're right. I mean, there's no question that helping through philosophy not working.
Right. Yeah.
I think we've pretty clearly, I think the show's very clearly condemning that as a way of helping people. Okay, I wanted to just say one thing. I'm going to talk about the conversation that spurred this, but I believe, it was our friend Janine on Twitter said something about how this show has many levels where you could experience it. So, there's just the swashbuckling pirate story, right?
Yeah, for sure.
That is definitely one way you could look at this show. And then you could choose to look at it this other way, where you choose to track all these themes and all this character development. And that this show's kind of amazing because you could actually completely enjoy it both ways.
Yeah, I can see that. Especially as it goes on, it really ups the ante with getting to the thick of things with the plot, because this has been kind of a slow burn for season 1.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that'll wrap us up for episode 7. We're very much looking forward to episode 8 next week. And until then, from Common Room Radio, I'm Liz Stevens.
And I'm Daphne Olive.
Fathoms Deep is a Common Room Radio production. For more information and access to other programs, please visit us at commonroomradio.com. To show your support, pledges of as little as $1 a month can be made to patreon.com/commonroomradio. Join the conversation by using the hashtag #Fathoms and follow us on Twitter at BlackSalesCast. We ask that you keep your tweets respectful and positive, and please avoid spoilers. If you have more to say, we want to hear it in all its spoiler glory. Email us at podcast@commonroomradio.com with Fathoms Deep in the subject line. Thanks for listening.